Assalamu alaikum, everyone. How are you doing? Today, inshallah, we're going to continue the second part of providing some necessary information to understand the first part of the Waste Land for T.S.Eliot. What we are going to talk about today is the vegetation myths and deities. This vegetation myths and deities are central to understand our own text. What does it mean, vegetation myths and deities? It means that the mythology of fertility, vegetation means fertility, and the beliefs or old beliefs, how to bring fertility, how to make the land green, to make the land green. So we are going to explain to you that all people in the past, they believed that they can bring fertility through certain actions that they can do. For example, I'm going to give you an example, right, that is famous in the Arab world about Egypt, for example. All Egyptians, they used to believe that they can make the Nile River to flood and bring fertility if they sacrifice a beautiful girl for the river. So this is, we call it a mythology of vegetation, right? Or what we call it a deity of vegetation, that they have to provide sacrifices for the river, a woman or a beautiful girl, in order to make it flood and bring vegetation. So what are the deities and the myths of fertility, right, found in the first part of the wasteland? So what are the vegetation myths and deities? They involve a dying god, usually, right? All these myths, they involve a dying god or a dying and rising god for the sake of rebirth and regeneration. So all these myths of vegetation mentioned in the first part of the wasteland, they involve that there is a god who sacrifices himself, right, for the sake of bringing fertility, okay, and this god, it might rise again in order to make regeneration, right? And these gods are usually considered as saviors, In Christianity, for example, they believe that Jesus sacrificed himself in order to redeem people from their own sins. And on the third day, after he died, he was remanifested, that he appeared again, right, to a group of Christians. Then, right, he went to the sky. So it is a God who was killed and buried, and after that, okay, in order to what? In order to rise again and bring fertility. We would like to make it easy for every student. What does it mean, right? A vegetation myth or deity? It is like this, right? If we have crops, the crops, if we try, right, to put them into the ground before they die, they want rise, that they must die. I mean, لو قلنا في عندنا جمح، الجمح لازم يموت وينشف، وبعدين نزرعه بعد ما يموت وندفنه. It must be buried. Without burial, there is no what? There is no fertility. There is no vegetation. So after we bury it under the ground, it will rise again as a kind of what? Of rebirth. A kind of rebirth. This is how we what? Grow everything. The seeds are dead. They must die and they must be buried in order to what? In order to cause the vegetation to happen. And therefore, what I'm saying, that any vegetation myth or deity, it usually involves a dying god, or this dying god must be buried, and after it is buried, right, it might be remanifested again, or it rises again in order to bring fertility and rebirth. So this case, what do we call it? We call it vegetation myths and deities, right? What are the things? Other deities, they believe in sacrificing a human being for the sake of fertility, like the woman, as I told you, that the woman that the Egyptians, that they used to sacrifice for the river Nile, in order to what? In order to flood and bring fertility, right? In all cases, all vegetation myths and deities, there must be a kind of a sacrifice. This sacrifice, it might be a god, it might be a human being, all right? And it must be, a state, they come to a state of death, and it must be buried in order to what? For the vegetation to come. One common Greek myth believe that each season has a god, So the Greeks, they believe that each season has a god. For example, right? Summer has a god, right? Winter has a god, okay? Autumn has a god, and okay, the spring has a god. And each god gives, right, dice, right? It gives the period or the duration to the other god. Well, what is the point here? That the math says that if the season doesn't come, it means the god of that season is dead. The god of that season, for example, we have, all right, the cycle of seasons. The cycles, after winter, we have spring, right? After spring, we have summer. And after summer, we have what? We have winter. Autumn, I'm sorry, we have autumn, and so on and so forth. Let's say that autumn doesn't come, but it will be a complete summer. A complete summer. What do they believe? They believe that, okay, the god of autumn is dead. The god of autumn, and they will live eternally in the last season. They will live eternally in the last season, right? If you have the text, and I hope that you have it, we will find that he starts with April is the cruelest month, right? April, so he mentions what? Mentions first April, which is the season of what? Of the spring. Then after that, right, in the second line, he says, winter kept us warm, in the second stanza. Winter kept us warm. It means that, okay, he mentions winter. And in the third stanza, he will say, summer surprised us. Summer surprised us. And this is the last season. All right, what is he missing? He mentioned April, then he mentioned winter, and after winter, he mentioned what? Summer, right? How about autumn? Is it mentioned? No, which means that the god of autumn is dead, and we will live eternally where? In the last season. What is the last season? Summer, which means that our land is going to be a complete waste land. A complete waste land. So here he is trying to give us a hint that the god of autumn, as long as it is dead, the cycle of seasons is going to stop, right? And it will be summer, eternal summer, which means that we are going to live in an eternal desert. Eternal desert. And as long as we don't have a complete cycle of the time, it means that the time is unredeemable. The time is unredeemable. Another thing, the cycle of seasons will not complete, and therefore we will live permanently in the last season. What is the last season? As I told you, mentioned in the poem, right at the beginning of the few stanzas, it is the summer season. The summer season, which is the season of drought, the season of no fertility. Well, we have Egyptian masks of vegetation of Isis and Osiris also, but it is not mentioned in what, it is not mentioned in the first part, it is mentioned in the third part, right? But Egyptians, right, they believed, right, that the god must die and be buried. You know, Isis and Osiris is a love story, right? Actually, right, you will find that, and both of them, a brother and a sister, they have a third brother. Isis loved Osiris. She did not love what the third brother, and that one was jealous. So he killed Osiris, right? Osiris was actually the god of vegetation, the god of fertility, right? And Isis was the god of beauty. He killed, because of his jealousy, he killed Osiris in order to what? In order to separate between Isis and Osiris. And he knows if Isis is going to bury Osiris, he will resurrect again. So what did he do? He chopped off his brother, chopped off, right, into what? Into small pieces. And they throw all the pieces of his own brother Osiris all over the land of Egypt, all over. Why? In order to make it difficult for Isis to what? To collect the whole body of her husband Osiris. But Isis loved Osiris a lot, and she spent part of her own life collecting the different body parts of her husband Osiris. So managed to find all the parts except one, and she replaced that one by a piece of wood, and then buried Osiris, who was resurrected again, and the fertility and vegetation came back to what? To Egypt. So what is the point here? That there is no vegetation unless there is death, and if there is no death, there is no what? There is no death, burial, and resurrection. If there is no death, there is no resurrection. If there is no burial, there is no resurrection at all. We have also a Norse mythology of a god called Odin. You know, Norse means the people who lived in Norway, the Vikings. They believed in a god. His name is Odin. This land, their land became waste, I mean dry, and he wanted to bring fertility. So he hanged himself upside down. What does it mean? It means that he hanged himself from his own feet and he stopped eating, right, on a tree, right, till he died. So they brought him back and they buried him. And after they buried him, what happened? He immediately returned to life and brought vegetation. The same with the Christianity. The death of Jesus, وما قتلوه وما اوكي يعني قديش ضلنا نعيدها انتم عارفينها, and the resurrection of Jesus after 3 days. After 3 days is compared like a kernel, like a seed that falls into the ground. This seed must be dead. If it is green, it will not grow. It must be dead. The seed must fall into the ground and then it dies and it produces many other seeds. So the vegetation mythology must involve 3 important things: death, burial, and rebirth. If there is no death, if there is no burial, there is no rebirth. There is no rebirth. What is the title of the first part of the wasteland? The title of the first part of the wasteland is the burial of the dead. Who is the dead? And whom we must bury in order to what? In order to bring fertility. Well, many people, they give different answers. First of thing, the one which must be, all right, buried is the season, the god of the season which is dead. Which god? The god of autumn. Fine, good. So the god of autumn must be buried in order to allow it for resurrection. And if the god of autumn is resurrection, we will not live permanently in summer, but the cycle of seasons is going to complete and we will move to fertility again. Well, also, right, the burial of the dead, it might refer, right, to another character that I am going to explain at the end. It is called Stetson. It is called Stetson, right? But let me, go a step by step. But by the time I come to Stetson, I will come to this point to remind you that Stetson's body must be buried in order to have rebirth, because if it is not buried, we will not have resurrection. So the title of what? The title of the first part is what? Is what we call it the burial of the dead. Yes. A third possibility is the burial of the character of Sibyl. The character of Sibyl. Some might tell me who Sibyl is. Who Sibyl is. The one is in the following. What?
Can I answer?
Yes, please. Go ahead. Nadia?
Yes, Sibyl, well, it's her story is a mythological story, and she is a character who wished or like asked God for eternal life, but forgot to ask for youth. So she kept on shrinking until she like turned into a very small human being who only wishes to die.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, Sibyl is actually a witch. A witch who asked Apollo for a long life. We call her the Sibyl of Camo. What is Camo? Camo is a city, the city that she used to live in, right? So Sibyl, right, she was a narcissist. She loved her body, she loved her beauty, she loved to live for long, She did not want to die, so she went to Apollo. Apollo is the chief god of the Romans. And she asked Apollo, please, for God's sake, give me as many years as, right, what? The grain of sands in my hand. So كبشت له كبشة رمل كبيرة ما بتقدرش تنعد. قالت له give me life as many as what? The grains of sands in my hands. Right, so Apollo asked her, are you sure that you want to live that long? She said, yes. She said, yes. So he says, okay, go. You are granted as many as the grain of sands in your hands. But because of her stupidity, she never, right, remembered to ask for eternal what? Eternal yacht. She asked for a long life, but she never, right, asked for eternal yacht. So what happened to her? Right, she started to grow older and older and older, and her body becomes weaker, and she is shrinking and becoming smaller and smaller, till in order that people used to step on her, but she doesn't die. She doesn't die. Right? She will be completely broken. So in order to protect her, they used to put her into what? Into a jar of glass. A jar of glass. And they used to put this jar of the inside the shrine, or the shrine of Kamo, right? This is a kind of a place, right? In Kamo, in the city. And children used to come around Sibyl and ask her, Sibyl, what do you want? What do you want? And she used to say, I want to die. I want to die. So she is looking for death, but she cannot find it. Do you know why? Because, right, she did not take into consideration, right, the youth of the civilization, not the long life, not the long life. And this story is used as the epigraph of the whole first part. You will find at the beginning of the text, you will find that the story of Sibyl is actually right as epigraph. What is epigraph? A kind of poetic lines that we usually use them at the beginning of what? Of an essay, at the beginning of a poem, at the beginning of a short story. Quotations that we use them at the beginning of an essay, at the beginning of a short story. We call it epigraph. We call it epigraph. So what is the epigraph? Usually the epigraph carries all the ideas of the essay. It carries the ideas of the short story that we want. It carries the ideas of the poem that we want to write. So when T.S.Eliot used the story of Sibyl as the epigraph, and he used written it in Latin, not even in English, it means that the story of Sibyl, it reflects the ideas in the first part, which is the burial of the dead. Who is the one who cannot be dead here? Sibyl cannot be dead. And if she cannot be dead, it means that she cannot be buried. And if she cannot be buried, it means that there is no resurrection, there is no redemption, and the land shall be waste till Sibyl dies, and she is going to what? To be buried. So T.S.Eliot is taking the character of Sibyl to be representative to the 20th century. The 20th century civilization who are seeking to live long, but they are not taking into consideration what makes their civilization young. Do you understand? Hello, sisters.
Yes, it's clear. Yes, it's very clear, actually.
Good. So the Sibyl of Camo, she was granted long life by Apollo, as many as the grains of sand that she held in her hands. And also, but she had forgotten to ask to retain her youth. With her aging, she was suspended in a bottle in the temple of Hercules at Camo. And she doesn't die. And if there is no death, there is no burial. And if there is no burial, there is no what? There is no resurrection, which means that our land is not going to have rebirth. Our civilization is going to wish to die, but will never find that death. Well, I'll move to something else. Countess Mary Larisch. The Countess Mary Larisch. Mary Larisch is the one here, all right, on your left-hand side, right? This is the first character Tiresias is going to meet in Germany, right? In Munich is going to meet. If you still remember, I told you yesterday that, all right, in the tale, the Canterbury Tales, we will find that Chaucer goes and chronicles the stories of the people who are going to pilgrimage. And he starts with the story of every person, one after another. Here, the one who is making the journey, as I told you, it is not Chaucer. The one who is making the journey is Tiresias, the modern Tiresias. The first land he's going to, or the first place he's going to be in, it's in Munich, right? Okay, near to a frozen lake, Strandbergersee. It is called Strandbergersee, right? It is a frozen land. And he is going to meet Mary Larisch. Mary Larisch. We would like to know who Mary Larisch is, right? Why? In order to see what is her own story, right? Well, so she is originally an Austrian countess from Austria, but she, in the poem, a representative for the Western women who are having lost identity, and they are wasting their time looking for their own desire. So, well, she is very well known for her illegal multi-relations to men. And she never felt ashamed for this. Actually, she wrote a book, all right, about her own experiences with men. And right, that book is entitled My Past. And therefore, right, when Tiresias talks to her, right, we will read some of her own stories from the book My Past as a representative for the falsehood of Western women interests, right? The rootlessness of women. Now, the word root in in the wasteland, it is exactly like the root at the beginning of what the beginning that was used by Chaucer. Chaucer. Chaucer was waiting for April to come and to bring the showers. These showers is going to pierce into the root, right? When we talk about literally speaking, he's talking about the root of what? The root of the trees of trees. But metaphorically speaking, the root here, it refers, according to Chaucer, to the spirit of the human being that must be right re-watered again after the dry marsh, after a long year, right, of drought. So he was waiting for April to come in order to what? In order to water his root. So the root here, it refers to spirituality according to Chaucer, and it is used by, right, T.S.Eliot to refer to the same thing, root, which whenever mentioned in the first part in right in the wasteland, it refers to the spirituality. And here, Mary Larisch, she is a representation for the rootlessness of the Western women. Rootlessness of Western women, the lack of spirituality, the lack of ethics, the lack of ethics. Well, right, we will read some of her diaries in the poem. But okay, when we read, I will remind you also, this is what part of, okay, from the diaries of Mary Larisch. Mary Larisch. Well, Tristan and Isolde. Tristan and Isolde is actually, originally it is an English myth. This English myth was used by a German musician. His name is Wagner. And he turned the story of the myth of Tristan and Isolde into a famous opera. It is called the Tristan and Isolde. So the Tristan and Isolde are going to be mentioned inside the text, but I have to tell you, right, the quotations are taken from Wagner's opera, not from the original English myth. Tristan and Isolde in 2007, they made it a movie. And it is a nice movie. It is a nice movie, but it is nearer to the myth rather than, okay, to Wagner's opera. What is the story of Tristan and Isolde and why it is important to be mentioned? How we can connect it to the main theme, right? We talk about the main theme of lack of what? Lack of rebirth. Why? Because of the sins, right? And here is going to be another part linking the math. Linking the theme to each other. Both of them are sinners. And okay, if you still remember the story of that I told you about, okay, the king who sent his own knights in order to look for the Holy Grail. And all of them died except one brought the Holy Grail again, right? But why fertility did not come? Because, right, salvation never comes at the hands of what? Of sinners. Tristan and Isolde is like that. So it is a love story. Here it is written before Romeo and Juliet. There was Tristan and Isolde. What is the story? Well, okay, it is opera by Richard Wagner, based on the English legend, right? Later in 2008, it became a movie from, right, differs from the original legend, the legend of King Mark and Tristan. England. Was a strong city. It was not a, I mean, we are talking about, right, the time in which, right, England was not a country. The England was controlled by the father of Tristan, this man. And his brother was called Prince Mark. Prince Mark. One day, the Scottish people attacked England, and they killed everyone, the king and all his own warriors. Except King Mark, he managed to defend himself, and he wanted to protect Tristan. One of the Scottish soldiers wanted to kill Tristan, right? And we will find that King Mark protects his own nephew by his own hand. And this is why his hand was chopped off. One of his hands was chopped off while he is protecting his own nephew called Tristan. But he managed to get him and to escape from the Scottish people. And after the invasion, they decided, to make the Prince Mark to become the king. When King Mark became the king, he wanted to make England strong. All what he thought of is to make England strong by preparing, right, the warriors, by making economy better, by making new armies, right? He was completely busy till he became 35 years old. And the young Tristan, who was 4 years old, right, he became about 22 years old, right? King Mark did not get married. Why? Because he was busy making a new state. So one day, Tristan went to his uncle and he told him that you need to get married. King Mark told him, I forgot. You forgot to get married. He said, okay, well, right, if you don't have time to look for a bride, I am the one who is going to look for a suitable bride for you. King Mark told him, okay, good. But why? Because he considered Tristan as his own son, and even more, more. And therefore, okay, we will find that Tristan started to ask about a beautiful, right, girl in order to what? To become what? To become a bride for his own uncle. But many people, they recommended him that the only girl who is suitable for King Mark is a woman called Isolde. Isolde is the daughter of the Scottish king. And she is very beautiful, and she is a doctor, a physician. She is a physician. It means that the best doctor in the area of UK, it was Isolde, a herbal doctor. Herbal. But he said, my God, the Scottish king is, they said it is the new Scottish king who is not hostile, and it will be a good chance to make new relations with the Scottish people again, right? Well, so he suggested that to his uncle King Mark that I should go there and ask for, right, the hand of Isolde to you. And it will be, and we will serve two purposes: in order to put an end to the permanent enmity between two nations, and to bring, all right, you a suitable wife that